I'm Mo Rocca, and I'm excited to announce Season 4 of my podcast, Mobituaries. I've got a whole new bunch of stories to share with you about the most fascinating people and things who are no longer with us. From famous figures who died on the very same day, to the things I wish would die, like buffets. All that and much more. Listen to Mobituaries with Mo Rocca wherever you get your podcasts.
Inspired by the life of the savvy and ambitious Colombian businesswoman Griselda Blanco comes a new Netflix original limited series. Griselda tells the story of a devoted mother who, with her lethal blend of charm and relentless savagery, creates one of the most powerful cartels in history. Witness Sofia Vergara's captivating transformation into the godmother of the underworld. Griselda, streaming January 25th, only on Netflix.
This is Central Texas Life with Ann Harder.
Hello, everybody, and welcome. We have a real treat for you today. I want you to meet Gary Penney, who is a bona fide cowboy poet. How in the world, Gary, did you get involved in cowboy poetry? Is this something you were always aware of from a little kid or what?
No, I got involved through a family member that was doing cowboy poetry, and I didn't know anything about it until like 2003. And his sister, he was a very straight-laced person. Mm-hmm. He had very little levity, very little humor, and he would just recite a poem like you might read it out of a book. And she came to me one day and said, "Gary, could you write Monty a poem and give it a little levity? He needs some levity in his poetry." And so I wrote the poem. I gave it to him. I heard him do it, and I thought, I can do that too. And that's how I got started.
So is it the subject matter has to be about cowboys or Texas or something
It's
old
about the
or
cowboy.
not?
It's about the cowboy lifestyle.
Oh, okay.
And I was never a cowboy, but I grew up around animals on my grandfather's farm.
Well, that counts.
I stepped in a pile or two, so I guess that qualified me as a cowboy. But I was always around horses and cattle, and both my grandfathers had farms, and my dad helped one of my grandfathers on his farm, and just about every weekend I would go out, and I was always around animals, and I just loved it.
There's always work to do.
There is always work to do. And cowboy poetry is about the cowboy lifestyle. It promotes the cowboy way of life. It can be from anything about a cowboy's love to love of his horse or love of cattle, the birth of young animals, just about anything that you might associate with a cowboy. And there's a big difference between what you see on TV and in the movies and what the old cowboy lived.
Well, there certainly is an interest in the old days, the old Westerns with Yellowstone and the 15 spinoffs. I mean, every time I look up, there's a new spinoff from Yellowstone.
Yeah.
So apparently, I mean, people are just clamoring for, and I remember back in the 60s and 70s, Gunsmoke and Bonanza and Maverick and all those shows when I was a little girl, and then it just sort of fell out of favor. Westerns were a big deal, and then they sort of fell out of favor.
Yep.
So maybe there's just a hunger for that sort of thing again.
I guess so.
So you sort of fell into writing cowboy poetry, reciting it by accident. You have certainly been an award-winning cowboy poet. Tell me a little bit about your trip to Kansas. Now, this was a few years ago.
This was in 2017. Every year they have what they call the National Cowboy Poetry Rodeo, and it's set up like a rodeo. You pay an entry fee for a number of poems that you do, and there are different categories. There's humorous and there's serious, and there's for poems that you have written, and then there's humorous and serious for poems that you might recite that somebody else has written. So
as a genre, there's quite a bit of
of
content out there, huh?
Yeah. And so I decided in 2017 that I was polished enough that I might could enter. So
apparently you were.
I guess. My wife and I went to Abilene, Kansas, where the event was held.
Uh-huh.
And I think I entered 6 of the 8 categories. I won 1 first-place buckle and 2 second place and a 3rd place. And because it's like a rodeo setup, the more you win, the more money you win. So, and at the end, the top money winner gets a prize buckle called the Best of the West. And the year that I went, I was fortunate enough to win that buckle. So
that's wonderful as a novice.
yes.
Yeah. So, I mean, how is it something that's really catching on? How many people are involved in this? Are there younger folks getting involved in cowboy poetry? Is this a dying art? I guess is my question.
There are a number of polished veterans out there.
Yeah.
And there are quite a few. But there are also some young
Really?
poets coming up. I was in Durango, Colorado a couple of years ago, and they actually had a section for young poets like high schoolers. And I know at the Salado event that has happened the last 2 years, they have had a category for school kids to enter and just recite their poems.
That's great.
They're trying to encourage these younger kids to get involved. So you're getting some 4-H'ers and some FFA kids and just farm kids that are getting involved that are familiar with animals and farm life and that are interested in things like that. So there are some younger poets coming up, but let me tell you, there are a lot of polished poets out there that are just amazing.
I think it's wonderful. And is there a I guess there's a body of literature. There are books of cowboy poetry available. And
yes.
Have you written a book? I know you've been taking part in some books. An art collection of all things.
That's correct. There is an artist in Arizona named Marlis Fellows, and she is just a fantastic Western artist. And she wanted to do a coffee table book.
Uh-huh.
And her coffee table book, she wanted to have her painting on one page and on the opposite page have a poem about that particular painting. And she put out on the internet an invitation to any cowboy poets across the U.S. to write a poem about her paintings, and then she and her family would select the poem to go in the book next to the painting. And I was fortunate enough, I believe, to have 9 poems selected to go in her book.
Really? And is that book still in print? Is that something
Yes,
folks
it is.
could? And Marlis Fellows, her name.
Yes. And
That is amazing. So you just happen to, are you like on a website for cowboy poets to even see this call for entries kind of a thing?
Now, that was over once the book was printed.
Right.
But I forget how she put that out. I believe it was on cowboypoetry.com.
Okay, there you go. That's what I was wondering, if there was like something folks could go to, and does that have a place then for new material from
Yes. In
from
fact,
cowboy poets?
I think the lady that ran that website has since decided to retire. So I don't know if that website is still valid or not.
Really?
But there are lots of poems. I think you can still go to that website. You may not be able to submit a poem, but you can read poems that people have submitted. I have a couple on there, so
Yeah.
very proud of that. And I've had several poems printed in books and magazines. So
And this all in recent history, really. You say what, 2003
2003 is
you
when
started.
I started. Yeah.
You kind of got involved with. I think that's fantastic. Now, tell me a little bit about yourself. Where I know you grew up in Corsicana, and folks, maybe I've got a Corsicana fruitcake right here, and I will explain more after the break. We'll take a break here in a little bit, but how Corsicana fruitcake figures in to my visit here with Gary Penney, cowboy poet. But you grew up in Corsicana, and your wife from Corsicana as well?
Yes, we're both from Corsicana, and of course the world famous Collins Street Bakery fruitcake is in Corsicana.
Yes, it is.
And anybody in Corsicana is familiar with that business. It's one of the biggest businesses in Corsicana. And during the off season, around Christmas, Thanksgiving, they hire a lot of local people to come in and help with the seasonal orders that come in. And my mother actually worked there for a couple of seasons. A lot of my high school classmates worked there during the Christmas season, taking orders. One highlight was my mother was working there one year, and she came in one afternoon, and she said, "Oh, you're going to love this, Gary." And I said, "What do you got?" She said, "Well, I took an order over the phone today." And she said, "Well," I said, "You take a lot of orders over the phone." She said, "Yeah, but this was a special one. This one came from the gentleman that plays Sky King on TV." And for all you older folks out there, you know who Sky King is.
That's exactly right. I couldn't tell you the actor's name, but
I couldn't either.
But yeah, I did just have the opportunity to do an interview with Thomas McNutt, who is fourth generation owner-operator there at Collins Street Bakery. And he told me they had just filled an order this recent season for a Walker Texas Ranger. Yeah, for Chuck Norris. So yeah, it was. So they still have a lot of very famous people ordering their fruitcakes. And yeah, it was a lot of fun. And Hayden Crawford, who is another one of the VPs, he sat where you're sitting right now, and we had a nice long chat recently about the 10 years ago fraud that was perpetrated against Collins Street Bakery. But tell me about, so how did you get to Waco? What did you do professionally? I mean, I assume you're retired.
I am retired now. I went to Sam Houston State University and received a degree in agriculture, animal science of all things. And I studied poultry mostly. And when I graduated from Sam Houston, I was offered a job with Swift & Company, Butterball Turkeys. Mm-hmm. And I worked 10 years for Swift Butterball Turkeys in Brownwood and Marlin. Marlin got me back closer to home, so but then that plant closed, and I had to get out and find something else to do, so I applied at M&M Mars, and because of my science background, nothing to do with animals, I got hired as a lab technician at M&M Mars, and I spent the next 30 years at M&M Mars. And my last 8 years, believe it or not, I was the taster. I did the taste training for the Mars plant here in Waco.
Skittles,
Starburst, and Snickers.
Now that's tough. That's a tough job.
It was a sweet job.
Somebody's got to do it.
I told somebody, I said, "How crazy can these people be? I work in a candy plant. I can eat all I want for free, and they pay me to do it." That just doesn't make sense. But
well, we lived close to the plant there, and I would, after my job at the TV station, I'd be driving home late at night, and I could smell, we're making grape Skittles. I could smell the flavors. So when did you retire?
I retired in 2011.
Okay. So you were writing your cowboy poetry.
Yes.
While you were still employed
At
there
Mars,
at M&M Mars, and as a kind of neat little hobby for you, I guess.
It has been. It's allowed my wife and I the chance to travel and meet all kinds of people. We have performed everywhere from Prescott, Arizona to Durango, Colorado, to venues here in the state of Texas. I've been at the Fort Worth Fat Stock Show, and Salado, Waxahachie, Lubbock, just lots of places around the Waco area, as well as many churches and civic clubs.
Oh, sure. I'm sure you are much in demand. Well, when we come back, I want you to recite a couple of poems for us. And one is specifically has to do with Collins Street Bakery's deluxe fruitcake. So stay with us. We'll be right back.
Hi, this is Sarah.
And I'm Carter.
And this is Some of Our Thoughts.
We're two Southern sommeliers, and we want to share everything we love and know about wine. We started hanging out during quarantine and cooking and drinking and listening to music. And we just thought this would be a great way to bring everything we know to you guys.
We will make wine knowledge and food pairings easy and approachable. So put on your favorite vinyl, grab your favorite glass of wine, tune into our show, and let's have some fun.
Wine and vinyl. So check us out on roguemedianetwork.com or wherever you get your favorite podcast. We'll be talking about a lot.
Welcome to One Star Rewind, a new podcast about those dreaded one-star reviews that every business owner hates to receive, but yet every customer loves to read. During this podcast, we will peel back that one-star review to better understand how it happened, when it happened, and what the business owner is doing after receiving that one-star review. This podcast will be about love, hate, and laughter. On One Star Rewind, we will meet with real business owners who will tell their stories and how they do rely on reviews for their business. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, or download us at roguemedianetwork.com. Please subscribe, but only rate and review for not a one-star review. Join us each time for a new review and a new story.
Pros and heroes. Gonna tell you about pros and heroes. Gonna tell you about.
Hey, I'm Zach.
And I'm Mike.
And we have a fantastic new podcast to tell you about. Bros, Foes, and Heroes. It's the two of us looking into the world of comics, breaking down some characters that you may have never heard of, and some that are just absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah, so Zach comes up with a character each time, and I go into it just completely blind. I don't know who this person is or what their abilities are or anything, and basically I guess we kind of go over their origin story and just some of the ridiculous stuff that maybe, especially Golden Age stuff.
Oh, Golden Age stuff is always the best, and we will make sure to highlight all of the shenanigans and just absolute weirdness of everything.
Yeah, that's right. So subscribe today and follow us on Instagram at Bros, Foes, Heroes.
And if you don't, I know where you live. Not really, but please subscribe.
Pros and heroes. Gonna tell you about pros and heroes. Gonna tell you about.
And we're back with Gary Penney, who is an award-winning cowboy poet who lives in Lorena, now grew up in Corsicana, and had an interesting career, very much so, as a taste tester for M&M Mars. I mean, that has got to be one of the primo jobs out there.
It was.
But I'll ask you some other questions here a little bit later. But I promised everybody we're going to hear some of your poetry. And one I just became aware that you had written is called The Cowboy on the Tin. And the reason I have this Collins Street Bakery fruitcake that I got in Corsicana not too long ago, this is the iconic tin that's been around for a long time now. Gary, you have hand me the picture you have. This was the original tin, looked like this. It did not have the logo Collins Street Bakery written on it. Of course, it says 1896 to let you know just how long this fabulous business has been around. But you say your mom worked there seasonally. Yes. Because it is a seasonal business, and they would hire on hundreds of additional people to help hand decorate these fruitcakes. Because I know over 1 million pounds of fruitcake went out of that business this past year. So, yeah, that it keeps him very busy. But what made you think to write a poem about this cowboy on the tin?
Well, I grew up in Corsicana, as I said earlier, and College Street Bakery was always a part of Corsicana. And my mom worked there a couple of seasons, and there were always fruitcake tins around the house. And just in my
yeah, you just can't throw them away.
No,
I mean, they're too nice
great
to
for
throw
storage.
away. Oh yeah, buttons or
nails or whatever, screws. And I got to wondering. I called over to Corsicana one day while I was here in Waco, and I said, "Can you tell me anything about the logo on this tin?" And they said, "No, we don't know anything about it. Just that we've used it for a number of years." And I said, "Well, would you mind if I write a poem about it?" And they said, "Go for it. Just, don't do anything out of line, and we'll let you do that." So I sat down and I wrote this poem called The Cowboy on the Tin, because I wondered what it was, and I thought, well, if I can portray my thoughts about this, maybe somebody else will have some thoughts about it too. So that's where this poem came from.
Okay, so you're going to recite it for us now.
I will recite it. I had this poem memorized at one time, but it's been a while since I've done it, so I'm going to have to read it to you.
That's fine.
One of my little grandsons just recently came out for a stay. He's kind of like his old grandpa because he always has something to say. He likes to dig through my old barns and sheds, always looking for hidden treasure. And he always brings his finds to me because it gives him so much pleasure. But one day when he came to me, he had a real puzzled look on his face, kind of like a look you'd see if you saw a ship from outer space. "Hey, Pops," he said as he approached me with a puzzled grin, "I found a bunch of old nails and stuff in this funny-looking beat-up tin. I ain't never seen nothing like this while digging around all your old machines. Can you tell me what I found here? Can you tell me what this means?" Well, I knew right away what he'd found when I caught sight of that old can. The first time I saw that artwork was years ago, before I ever became a man. "Carter," I said as I looked into his inquisitive little eyes, "let's go sit on the porch in our rocking chairs, and I'll tell you about your prize." This wonderful can came from Corsicana, a Texas town filled with pride. The people there make delicious fruitcakes that are known by folks worldwide. The amazing graphics on this can were designed many years ago, but the artist's name was never signed, so of him we'll never know. So I'll do my best as we look at this lid to tell of its grand old story. Not only did this can hold a delicious cake, but it tells of Texas glory. The snow scene with the carriage and house tells me this is a long way from here. You see that fine lady and gentleman? Do you see their gifts of holiday cheer? I'd bet they're on a Christmas visit because they look so happy and jolly. But what gives the season away to me is the bow there and the berries and holly. Giving fruitcake to your friends has become a holiday tradition, and the College Street Bakery in Corsicana bakes for that very intention. Now, I believe that that's the tale this wonderful snow scene is trying to tell. This artwork confirms what I told you, and it does it so very well. "But, Pops," said Carter, with a disappointed look on his face, "tell me about that cowboy. Tell me about his space." "He's right there in the middle of the lid, twirling that big old rope. Did you leave him out on purpose? Are you trying to pull a joke?" "Settle down, Carter," I said with a sheepish grin. "I'll tell you about the cowboy, and now the real story begins. You see that old yellow building up near the top of the can? That building is the Alamo, where the heartbeat of Texas began. 185 men stood so our republic could be free. They barricaded themselves against 5,000, and they did it for you and me. For 13 days of bloody glory, they mustered and fought and died, and right there in that old Spanish mission was born our own inherent Texas pride. The battle for Texas independence was bought and paid for in that war. You can see that sign of our freedom and pride shining in that bright lone star. And right there in the middle of that star is another great symbol of our state. That old cowboy represents our grit and spirit and what makes our people so great. From the top of his hat to the rowels of his spurs to that colt hanging there at his side, you can tell this old cowboy means business, and he takes serious his Texas pride. Men like him helped to build this land through courage and sheer determination. His gutting it out when times were hard helped to give us a pride in our nation. And that great pride still lives on today, down deep in every Texan's heart. When you tell someone that you're from Texas, well, that just kind of sets you apart. So now when you see this old cowboy on the tin, I hope that you'll think of Texas pride and think about the secret ingredient that was added to the cake inside. Well, Carter, that's about it. I really don't know what else to say. You found a pretty cool prize there. I'd say you've had a pretty good day. Silently, he sat there for a few seconds more as he pondered the old cowboy's fate. Then he looked up at me and he smiled and he said, "I love you, Pops. I think I'll go see if Graham's has some of this cake."
I love it. I love it. Gary, what a way to memorialize something as iconic as a deluxe fruitcake from the Collins Street Bakery and this historic tin. So that I just got to tell you, cowboy poetry can be whatever kind of strikes your fancy.
It does.
To memorialize, I guess, in a way. So have you written any new things? I mean, what year did you write The Cowboy on the Tin?
That was written in 2004.
Okay, so it's been around.
So
yeah. So what's your latest poem about?
My wife and I recently celebrated our 50th wedding anniversary, and I wrote a poem for her.
Congratulations.
For our anniversary. Kind of caught her off guard.
I'll bet.
But I haven't written any cowboy poetry lately.
Mm-hmm.
I had some health issues a few years back, and since then I just haven't sat down to write.
Yeah.
I have ideas in my head, but I just have not followed through with them.
Mm-hmm. Well, maybe so. Maybe that can...
It'll come back.
That'll come back. That'll come back for you. Well, this has been so much fun, and I just I think as a genre of poetry, this is something that needs to stay alive and vibrant. And you're obviously doing that. Do you travel anymore to any of the?
We went to
poetry conventions.
Yes, they have their cowboy poetry gatherings around. There are not too many in Texas, believe it or not.
Really?
The one in Lubbock, the Lubbock one, we always enjoyed going out to Lubbock for that one, but COVID kind of did them in. They didn't have one this past year, but since that has happened, Salado has had one. They have one, I believe it's the second weekend in May.
Okay.
They've had two so far. And Waxahachie actually had their first one this past, it's been about 2 months ago.
Good.
And I've been invited to come back. They're going to have another one this year on September 30th. So
Excellent.
We still travel around and get to see lots of old friends. And it's like a family reunion because we see a lot of the same people. And there are some really cool people doing cowboy poetry. So if you've not been to a cowboy poetry gathering, mark down Salado and mark down Waxahachie. Those are two good. They're young, but they have some quality talent that are coming in and doing poetry and cowboy music.
Oh yeah. Well, I think of that too. Of course, country and western music is so huge, and a lot of the stories that are told in those songs, could suffice as cowboy poetry. Many of them, I'm sure. Yeah. Well, it is so much fun to talk with you. I like to end these visits with a little questionnaire that I ask to my guests.
Okay.
And it's, if you remember, Inside the Actor's Studio with James Lipton. Anyway, It was sort of my take on his questions. And I'll ask you, what is your favorite word?
Well, my wife would say, "What?"
I get it. Been married 50 years. What is your least favorite word?
Trash.
Okay. All right.
Take out the trash.
I mean, you are a creative person, obviously. What turns you on creatively or spiritually or emotionally?
A lot of times I get inspiration just listening to our pastor in church.
Mm-hmm.
I have thoughts that run through my head, and they're very inspirational. If I would just sit down and write something about it, but I tend to go home and just forget all about it.
Eat lunch and
eat lunch and
watch football game.
Football, yeah.
I hear you.
But,
I hear. Well, what turns you off creatively, or spiritually, or emotionally?
I would say I'm turned off by people who want to talk while you're doing your poetry, and are not listening.
Right.
Because, poets put a lot of work into this.
Yeah.
I mean, when I write a poem, it usually takes all day to do it.
Sure.
Because you have to come up with a thought. You have to, I usually start with an ending. How do I want this poem to end? I have the thought of what I want to say, but where am I going to take it? How is it going to end? So a lot of times I'll come up with the ending first, and then I'll write a story to get there.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have to make it all rhyme.
I get that. I get that. What sound do you love the most?
Applause.
All right, good. Honest answer. That's good. I love that. What sound do you hate?
Hadn't really thought about it, but coughing.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, when you're trying to recite your poetry. Get a cough drop. Yeah. What other profession would you, I mean, you were a taste tester at M&M Mars, so you just can't beat that. But what other profession would you like to have tried?
Possibly sports journalism.
Okay. All right.
My son is actually doing that in Abilene.
Good. Good.
He's the voice of the Abilene Wiley Bulldogs on the radio.
That's great. What job do you know you would not want to do at all?
Porta potties.
All right, the guy that has to monitor those. All right, and finally, Gary, what do you want to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
I'm glad to have you. Job well done.
Yeah, yeah. That's what we all long to hear at that time. And it is a job well done. I mean, I'm telling you, Gary, that's just getting to hear about cowboy poetry and and your journey in this particular field of artistic endeavor. It's just delightful. And to kind of continue my theme of Collins Street Baker, of course, the can of fruitcakes. I don't sort of fell into that by accident myself, but it's been a fun little journey this Christmas season as well. So thank you again, Gary, for being with us. Yeah, it's been a lot of fun, and thank you for being with us. And join us again for another edition of Central Texas Life. Bye-bye.
Central Texas Life with Ann Harder is part of the Rogue Media family. Be sure to check out our other shows at roguemedianetwork.com. Please rate this show 5 stars on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, or anywhere you get your podcasts. Join us again soon for more Central Texas Life with Ann Harder.